Hey, David Taub here from nextlevelguitar.com. How you doing? Hope all is well, and I hope your guitar journeys are going famously. I just have a quick tip today on tube amplifiers and some of the intricacies of the tube amp that you may run into, which could cause your tube amp to not perform at its best. And I run into this problem a lot. I play with my band Leo Rising all throughout Southern California, and and I'm sure if you've played out a lot and used your amp a lot, your ear gets used to the sound of your amp, and you should hear these changes like, oh, something just doesn't sound right, right? Well, and you might have run into this if you're playing out in a lot of bars and clubs, but I want to make you aware of it and some of the things you could do to prevent it. I'm talking about when your amp just isn't sounding right, and it's nothing wrong per se with the amp. Like if you have your tubes are good, the amp has been performing fine, but you're plugging in at that club and maybe it's sound check, or you're plugging in at rehearsal and it just doesn't sound right. And it very well could be the power coming into the amp. Tube amps are very sensitive to fluctuations in power. So maybe you're using a building where that's older maybe, and the line voltage isn't 120, or it's fluctuating between 100 and 120, and your tube amp is going to react very differently to those fluctuations in voltages. I don't know how many times I've got my amp all set up at a gig and I'm playing it, it's like, it just doesn't sound right. And all I did was I make sure I bring extension cords to every gig, big heavy duty extension cord, and I change where it's plugged into. Instead of plugging into an outlet behind the amp, I run the cord to another outlet down the stage or down the bar or wherever to try another circuit. Especially in a lot of older bars and clubs, or some places maybe that haven't been updated or renovated, they might have, lots of power drawing from a few circuits, and it's causing these spikes. And it's really going to affect your tube amp, and the amp just isn't going to sound right. To me, it sounds like very dull and a little muddied when I'm having problems with the line voltage coming into the amp. And this is basically just a tube amp situation, because the tube amps are so sensitive to this. So if you are playing out at rehearsal or at a bar or club or wherever, and you're hearing this phenomenon, just try it. And it certainly could be something wrong with your amp, But if you take care of your amp, you change the tubes regularly, and you have a bias if it needs to be biased and whatnot, and you kind of know it's okay, and it's not cords or effects or batteries or anything like that. But just run to a different power source, run your power, and you'll be surprised. And the sound guys that we use, J&R Pro Audio, we use for our live gigs, I mean, a lot of times in a lot of venues, I see them scurrying around, and they're constantly frustrated, especially at the older venues, trying to find clean power, because it can affect the whole audio system or PA system. So it's just a little tip for you that could save you a lot of time, just running it. I always, when something breaks down or doesn't sound right, I go for the simplest stuff first, just to save time, Is it a cable? Is it a cord? Is it the power? Am I getting clean power? What's going on? Let me try another guitar, let me try another chord. Something else that I think is important that I do, and you might want to consider it, is I use a really heavy duty, hardcore power cord running from the power source into my amp, and it makes a big difference. I think so anyway. The cord I use is this. This is a cord made by a company called Grant Fidelity, and this cord is used, they originally designed it to use in high-end audio systems, which again, especially if there's tube preamps, very sensitive to voltage fluctuations. And this is 16 gauge, look at the thickness of this, 16 gauge twisted copper. It has an RF filter built right into it. So it has this filter to filter out any interference. The filter's built right into the cable. This is Teflon insulated, and it has the gold hospital grade plug ends. If I know a good power source, I plug it right into the wall, and it has the 3-pronger right into the head, my amp. And it really makes a difference, because I've tried it in venues using the stock thin power cord that comes with the head, and then I've used this, and I can hear the difference. And I'm not just saying this, I mean, get any, you know, I'm not endorsed by any companies or anything like that. I'm just trying to pass on information that will hopefully help you in your guitar journeys. Now this cable is a little bit pricey, but I have a very expensive, my live rig, I use a matchless Independence head. You know, it's a very expensive head. So, you know, I see that a lot where guys have real expensive equipment and then they have like a $10 bargain bin patch cord, you know, and it makes no sense. You know, you want to have, if you have a really good piece of gear, you really want to, you know, make sure that the power going to it, that your connections to it are pretty top grade, you know. So this cable, and you can go to grandfidelity.com to check it out, but this cable is about $130, but if you tell them Next Level Guitar sent you, tell them David from Next Level Guitar sent you and you're a musician, you know, they'll sell it to you for $100. And I think that's pretty fair considering this is 16 gauge twisted copper, and it really helps your sound. And many instances, like the bass player in my band, he runs his through, he has one of these cables. I turned him onto it because he was having lots of problems with hum, and that took care of it. He has actually a Furman power conditioner also, and that has a meter on it which tells you how much, you know, line voltage is coming in. You know, 120 is usually the standard in the United States. I think 240 is the standard in a lot of Europe and whatnot. But, and you could actually see, a lot of times I'll sit there and I'll watch the meter, and in some places, man, it goes down to 108, 109, it comes back up, and you can actually see the power fluctuating, and that really plays havoc with your equipment, especially tube amps. Very sensitive to that, especially the transformer, which is, you know, a huge part of your tube amp, which is often overlooked and in many instances not talked about or discussed. You know, most people are very much totally focused in on tubes, and while that is a big part of the amp sound, the transformer, output transformers are certainly a big part of it also, you know, because, you know, the tubes are dependent on the circuitry that they're connected to, and amps are designed to run on regulated voltages. You know, and it's the transformer's job to help with that, to take that 120 volts coming in, or 240, and step it up to, you know, up to 400, even more volts, on, depending on what the tube amp is designed to run on, or in instances for the actual tubes to step it down to between, you know, 6 or 13 volts. So those regulated voltages and that transformer's job is so important, and the transformer itself is a huge part of your amp's sound, and it's often overlooked and not talked about, but it's a big part of the sound. Now there's companies that are making transformers to swap out, and in my matchless, it's a totally hand wound transformer. And you know, it's the transformer, because it's big and heavy, there's a big cost involved. One of the most expensive parts of the amp. So a lot of amp manufacturers, you know, and it's heavy too, so shipping costs, so they're trying to keep costs down to, you know, make the amp more desirable at a more budget price. So they have to kind of scale back the transformer, reduce the weight. The transformer is such a huge part of the amp's sound. Don't overlook it when you're talking about tone. And remember that you know, that tube amps are designed to run on specific, very specific power requirements. And when that starts fluctuating, or when it's not up to a certain level, your amp isn't going to sound as good as it should, and you'll hear it. Believe me, you'll hear it. You'll just be like, this doesn't sound right. So check out our website at nextlevelguitar.com. Right now, we're actually running a 3-day free all-access site pass. So go to nextlevelguitar.com, and you'll see it right on the home page, where you could actually try our membership site out. There's over 600 lessons, video lessons, jam tracks, written lessons, chord library, and you can try it out for a couple days for free to see if you like it or not, see if it's for you. So give it a try. You might like it. Try it, Mikey. And also subscribe to our YouTube videos, and then you'll be notified when we have new lessons coming out. And we're going to keep cranking out, you know, the lessons on, you know, beginner, intermediate, advanced lessons. We do also lessons on, you know, amplifiers and settings, and gear, guitars and gear and tunings, and, you know, singing and playing at the same time, and on songwriting and instrument care and rhythm and lead, and it's all on the website. So check that out. And my name is David Taub. You're the good people. I will see you soon. Rock on and rip it up.